Hey guys, and welcome to the North Shore of Lake Burley Griffin. I'm here for a very late episode of Capital Chat as I want to talk to you guys today about term limits. Now, right behind me there is the famous statue of Sir Robert Menzies, Australia's longest serving Prime Minister. Obviously I would have gone to the suburb of Menzies, but there actually isn't a suburb of Menzies. There's a suburb of Holt and a suburb of Whitlam, but for some reason Menzies never wanted a suburb named after him. I don't know if that was his own personal choice or just how the cookie crumbles. But the reason why I'm here at the Robert Menzies statue is because Robert Menzies was very infamous during his time as Prime Minister of calling early elections to benefit him. So you see, unlike other countries or even states in Australia, Australian federal elections aren't fixed. They have to occur before a certain date, but the Prime Minister can call the election whenever he feels like. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't particularly like giving that sort of power to the Prime Minister. So I decided to open up a poll to you guys to see what you guys think about term limits. So basically I put up four options. One was to keep it as we currently do, which is 3-year unfixed term. So basically an election has to be called within 3 years. 3 years fixed, so same term limit, but instead we know the election date beforehand. It's a fixed election date. 4 years fixed, which is what a lot of state governments do. And finally, other. And interestingly, 50%, not the majority, just similar majority, said that they want 4-year fixed terms, which surprised me a little bit, because I know a lot of my audience are very politically engaged, and I personally would probably say something like 3 years fixed, because I want the ability, let's just say I want the ability to vote out of government I don't like sooner rather than later. But yeah, it's interesting that a lot of you guys want to just copy the state model and go to the 4 years. Perhaps a lot of you guys think that the 4 years brings a bit more stability, being for the government to be able to do a bit more in a term without having to think about the next election. So let's see what a few of you guys have said. So the first one, coming from George Keneally, says, I think there should be 4-year unfixed terms like they have in Tasmania. That's interesting. Interesting that you want to extend the term limit, but at the same time you don't want to fix the Parliament House. So I think it's interesting, and I think we'll see a few reasons why some other people like the unfixed terms a bit, because we've got the next comment coming from Jow Flight, who says, especially as it looks like we're heading towards a general, more chaotic Parliament, it's more important than ever that the PM has the option to throw up their hands and demand a new Parliament. Again, this is very interesting, because I'm obviously at the Robert Menzies statue, partly because he called early elections not to end chaos, but to take advantage of chaos. That's the one concern I have about unfixed terms going, it can help remove the Prime Minister. I remind you, it's the Prime Minister who calls the election. So you're not exactly getting a benefit from giving him that power. If he thinks it's not beneficial to call an election, he won't call an election. You just need to look at something like the UK, where the Conservatives went through most of their last term very unpopular, with a lot of people wanting an election. But of course, they weren't going to call the election because they knew they were going to lose. So yeah, I don't entirely agree with that comment. Anyway, we've got the next one from Ayok, I think it's Ayok KK or something. He says, I like the idea of 4-year fixed terms. It would probably require changing the Senate elections as well, though. I feel like 8-year terms for senators is too long. Yeah, that's one I can sort of agree with. Obviously, I think 8 years, definitely is too long for senators. Not even in the US, where it feels like senators staying forever, gives them 8-year terms. It's 6, like Australia just. But yeah, it's possible. If we were to go to 4-year terms, I think we'd probably almost have to end the double dissolution and have every election be a double dissolution and just vote for the entire Senate all at once. Yeah, I could definitely see that be a problem. Or possibly have the Senate on a separate calendar. Although, again, talking with Robert Menzies, he famously split the House and Senate calendar in the 60s, and then we proceeded to have basically an election almost every year. We had to go vote for the House and then vote for the Senate and then vote for the House again and then vote for the Senate again. So I'm probably not the biggest fan of breaking up the House and Senate calendar, as I think it's kind of convenient to be able to vote for both at the same time. Next up we have Nadrini, who says, would be great if Victoria's 2003 referendums got replicated in the Commonwealth level, maximum of 4-year terms for the lower house, with the first 3 years being fixed. For a good measure, the Senate can't make the PM call an early election because they can no longer block supply bills, but still retain the ability to block ordinary legislation. 8 years is too long for the Senate. Link lower and upper chamber terms then with the half senators retiring each general election. So yeah, I'm not sure he's proposing some sort of mid-term election where we vote for half the Senate 2 years into the government and then vote for the government as a combined election on every 4 years. That could possibly be an idea. But it's interesting about like 3-year fixed terms, like you can't call an election before 3 years, but you then can between the 3 and 4 years. Again, I don't think that fixes the problem of the Prime Minister taking advantage and calling elections when he wants, but it definitely is a interesting way of, it's definitely an interesting way of preventing early elections being called, which I think is annoying. Like, obviously, I'd love to vote every year, but I also understand that that would mean parliamentarians would be constantly running for re-election. It already feels like they're always running for re-election in the US, and that's 2 years. But at the same time, also, I don't think people want to necessarily vote that frequently. I think people kind of like to be able to not think about politics for 3 years or so. So I do like the idea of potentially like locking it. I do like the idea of at least the fixing it past 3 years. Next up, we have Boy Born Fresh, who says 5 years unfixed. Yeah, no surprise. The British with the British, he's got the British flag and a fist and a flexing emoji. Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if he's being a little silly there, but I think we've already pointed out why the UK election, 5 years is just way too long. Like, it felt like the Tories were in forever just because of how long those term limits were. Again, I don't think you should ever go beyond 4-year terms. And like, you know, with Russia with like their 6-year terms. Ugh. No, I don't. I don't think 3 to 4 years is the sweet spot of enough time to get stuff done, but not too much time that that a party can get really old and stale, but then you can't vote them out because the election isn't for ages. Next up, we have Real Common Gains. He says, semi-fixed terms of 3 or 4 years with a single dissolution will occur automatically if the PM loses a vote of confidence or a vote of supply, and a double dissolution if the PM loses a vote of supply in the upper house, but not the lower house. I believe, I'm not sure if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but even in states with fixed election calendars, there are abilities to call the election early if need be. It removes the power from the Prime Minister and instead requires a vote in Parliament. I think it requires a vote of no confidence. So if the Prime Minister wants to call an election early with a vote of no confidence, which I think will look very bad on him, I think they can. But regardless of that, I think at the end of the day, it's not terrible, that idea of sort of semi-fixed terms. But yeah, I do. Again, even in a fixed term, there are the ability to call the election early. Again, I just don't think it should be given to the Prime Minister. Next, we have Luca Pikachu, who says, "No, I don't think so. I like the current system." Look, I can somewhat agree with him. We've been on non-stop 3-year. We're on the longest stretch of 3-year election terms in Parliament history. Now, sure, we have ones where I think like the election used to be in September and now it's in May, so technically it's like lost 6 months. So we've had like a 2.5-year term. But regardless of that, we still are basically seeing elections every 3 years. I think we're going to be due for our first election to occur within 2 years, because I think eventually the election gets put into March, which it might do in the next term or two. It'll then get pushed into February, probably inevitably, and when it does that, it'll probably jump all the way to November the previous year, because you don't really call elections in December, January and February, the peak of summer. So yeah, I do think we're probably due for one soon, but at the same time, Luca Pikachu's right. We haven't really had an issue of Prime Ministers calling early elections. Again, I've got Robert Menzies here, and he obviously hasn't been Prime Minister since the 60s. So at the end of the day, is it maybe a big issue at the end of the day? Perhaps not. Finally, we have Smiles Mate, who says, I think 4 years is the sweet spot, but I think it means Senate reforms. 8-year terms for the Senate is too long. Some people have said 5 years, but in my opinion, that's just too long. How boring to only have election every 5 years. Again, yeah, that's me talking earlier. I don't think 5 years is too long. To be honest, I feel like this discussion has actually somewhat turned into a debate more about 3-year or 4-year terms, less so about the whole fixing the calendar. But it definitely is an interesting debate with you guys. So that's probably what I'll probably throw in the comment section for you guys. How long do you think the election terms should be? Do you like that it's currently 3 years for the House, or do you think it should be like the States and be 4 years? And also tell me your opinions on if you think it should be fixed or unfixed. I know this was a bit of a more rougher video today, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time, where I'm hoping to be at a very special location. So stay tuned for that poll. So stay tuned for the next poll coming out, and you'll see me for my next Capital Chat from that said special location. Until next time, I will see you later.